Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 1123, 1123, Tuesday, May the 5th, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in. Also, I appreciate all the comments in the comments section. I try to review the comments every day. Obviously, I have a full-time job, actually a full-time and a half job, so I don't always have the opportunity to personally comment on all of your comments because there's quite a few comments there, but sometimes I just can run through and give thumbs up. Sometimes I just kind of scan through it, but I do see all those nice things you guys always say, and I do see it, and I do appreciate it. Can't always comment on it or get back to you or say thank you or whatever, but just so you all know, I do review those comments pretty regularly, and I do appreciate all the compliments you all offer. Thank you. Now let me go ahead and get started right here. Probably a couple big news stories yesterday, and then we're a little bit more of a deep dive into more of the coup based on older information that, again, a lot of, over the past 2 years or so, we've had a lot of information come out, and a lot of times when that information comes out, you kind of see where it's important, you kind of see some relevance, but you don't exactly realize for another year or two later, once you've accumulated a lot of other information, then you go back and look at the older information, and then you start to see a lot of other things that because you have new information now that you didn't have back then, things begin to look a little different. So that's why going back and reviewing a lot of older information is somehow taking on, gives us a newer or a closer or deeper look into what actually happened. So it's all this information that's come out, and at different times throughout this entire process, it looks like it means different things. So you continue to go back and look at that older information, and in addition to the new information, and things start to make more sense. So keep that in mind as we go through the information in today's video. Okay, so it looks like Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray, the current director of the Federal Bureau of I'm With Her, is obviously on the bubble. He's on the bubble, and certain members, Republican members of the House of Representatives, have finally had their fill. They're sick of what's been going on there with No Shit Sherlock Christopher Wray. Clearly, we're getting all this information about Michael Flynn. Wray has had this information for a very long time. This information has been requested by Nunes's committee, by Jordan's committee, by the Goodlatte committee prior to the 2018 election. These documents and all this information has been requested many times by many different people throughout the process. And No Shit Sherlock Wray has been hiding it. He has been hiding it. And now that it's all coming out, obviously, there's a lot of people pretty upset, particularly Jordan and some of the Republicans on the House Intelligence or on the House Judiciary Committee. And they're wanting to know why Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray has set on this information that would have probably exonerated Michael Flynn 2 years ago. So it looks like they're attempting to take some action. I don't know how far they'll get with this, but at least ways they're making the effort. So it looks like House Republicans led by Jim Jordan and Mike Johnson have sent a letter to No Shit Sherlock Christopher Wray demanding all documents on the operations against General Flynn. They also want the interview from Pientka and Priestap. They want all the communications between FBI agents and other executive agencies, including the Executive Office of the President. That would be Obama. From December 2016 to January 20th of 2017. Also, they also want to know from Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray when he first learned of the FBI's misconduct with respect to General Flynn. So now they're starting to apply the pressure on No Shit Sherlock Christopher Wray, and they certainly should. For some reason, Barr continues to praise no shit Sherlock Wray and offer his support. And that's a head scratcher. That's just one thing I have not yet been able to figure out. There's obviously something going on here, some information we don't have. There's something we don't know. I mean, it's the only thing you can say here. Clearly, Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray has been covering up and hiding information that would have exonerated Michael Flynn, as well as many other things about the actual coup. He's been covering all that up, yet Barr continues to, on one hand, give Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray the stamp of approval, while at the same time he is making very critical statements of the FBI leadership and how they handled everything. And he's declassifying things and releasing them that Christopher No Shit Sherlock Wray wouldn't release. So it's really hard to know what Barr's thinking on this is on this, and I can only conclude that there is something that Barr knows in regards to Wray that we do not yet know. I don't know what that is. But something is going on here. Unless Barr has got a Jekyll Hyde complex. Now, in addition to yesterday's 6-page letter from Jordan and Mike Johnson to No Shit Sherlock Christopher Wray, we also had a report yesterday that sources close to the Trump White House say that Trump wants No Shit Sherlock Wray fired, but says he will defer to Attorney General Barr. Now, we're also being told from this story that Trump's advisors are telling him, yeah, Christopher Wray is, he's not a straight shooter, quite honestly. No, he's not. You're right, Mr. President, he's not a straight shooter, but from a political perspective, best to wait till after the election if you're going to fire him. Don't do it before the election. It'll create a lot of problems for you that you don't want or need. Could be problematic. So this is what I said about 2 weeks ago. I said that No Shit Sherlock Christopher Wray, that as soon as the 2020 election is over and Trump wins re-election, I don't think Wray will be around for probably more than 1 hour. I think as soon as Trump wins the election, the very first announcement he's going to make is that No Shit Sherlock Christopher Wray is out the door. I think that that's likely to happen. So we'll keep watching that and see how that goes and see what more comes out of this. But at some point down the line here, we're going to have to learn about what's going on with Wray, because Barr continues to, I don't want to say defend him, but continues to give him the stamp of approval. Talks about how much he's cooperating with the investigation. While you look at the situation and you can see where he's done nothing but stonewall. Now maybe he's working with Barr and Durham, but he certainly hasn't been very forthcoming with members of Congress. So maybe that's where the rub is. Maybe it's with Barr. Maybe Wray is totally cooperative and working with the Durham investigation. But as far as working with Congress or anyone else, he's not so cooperative. In fact, very uncooperative. But I guess what bothers me, and the reason I think he should resign or be fired immediately by Barr, is because we're getting this Flynn information over the past 2 to 3 weeks, especially what we had last week with those unsealed documents uncovered by Jeffrey Jensen, the Missouri U.S. attorney. Clearly, Wray was knowledgeable about these documents. These documents exonerate Michael Flynn. Why would Christopher Wray knowingly block these documents, knowing that they essentially exonerate Flynn? And of course, they show the criminal malfeasance of the FBI agents. Now you can say, well, that's easy. He's trying to protect the FBI. Okay, well, if that's the answer to the question, then why does Barr say that he's got so much confidence in him and give him the stamp of approval? There's something going on here, and I don't know what it is. But I think we'll eventually find out. It may be simply a case of Barr looking at the politics of it. And for the same reason that Trump's being advised, hey, it's not going to look very good. It's just like what happened with Ratenstein. Clearly Barr figured out that Ratenstein was rogue. But he used Ratenstein. That's why I think he didn't get rid of Ratenstein. And then what happens when Barr comes out and does his briefing on the Mueller report and makes the call on part 2 of the Mueller report where they leave it up in the air on the obstruction thing, Barr shoots it down. And who's he got right behind him? His beady little eyes looking straight ahead into space? Ratenstein. So clearly, Barr thinking, he knows that D.C. is a political place. He's a law guy, but he's a law enforcement guy, but he's in a political environment. And he probably said to himself very early on when he came in, Ratenstein's a rat. But if I fire him, I'm going to take all kinds of political heat. It's going to take away from my credibility here in the swamp. What I really need is to use Ratenstein so that when I come out and exonerate the president and I force him to end the Mueller, because really Ratenstein was running the Mueller investigation. So Barr had to, probably what he did was he used his leverage, what he knew about Ratenstein being a rat, and probably said, hey Rod, you're a rat. I got you busted. Let me show you how to save your ass. You're going to end the Mueller investigation, and you're going to end it very quickly. And then you're going to, stand behind me 100% in every call that I make in regards to the findings of the Mueller report. That's what you're going to do, Rod, or I'm going to throw you to the dogs. And he may be doing the same thing to Christopher Wray. And it may be a political issue where he knows that if he fires Wray, immediately say, well, there's Attorney General Barr. He gets rid of the FBI director who's a straight-up honest guy, so he can bring in another Trump supporting FBI guy. So it may be just a political calculation that Barr is making here, and that he knows that Wray is just as dirty as Ratenstein. But he's making a political calculation to sacrifice for the overall good, because he knows eventually he's going to be bringing the cases against the deep state players, and he already knows it's going to be a political shitstorm, and he wants to limit his liability on his end. And probably what he wants is when he comes out and, once the Durham investigation is over and they're prosecuting all the criminals, he wants to have Christopher Wray standing next to him, endorsing fully what's happening. So it may be the same exact play by Barr. That's my wild guess. Other than that, I really don't know. Speaking of what I don't know, let's talk about what Sidney Powell does know. Now, these unsealed documents that none of us have really been able to see all of, and there's other things there. Sidney Powell has seen this stuff. It has been told to her. I don't know if she's seen the physical documents, but Jensen did either brief her personally, verbally, or by letter as far as to what the content is of those unsealed documents that he just sent over. And he says there is going to be more. They're working on that right now. So knowing that, we have Sidney Powell talking to Breitbart yesterday saying that Flynn was fired because he would have discovered the FBI's crimes, their investigation of the Trump campaign, including Flynn himself, and that Flynn was the first part of the insurance policy. Yes, I think that that's the general conclusion. That's one of multiple reasons why Flynn had to go, why they had to get rid of Flynn. Obviously, that's the obvious thing. I mean, he was going to be, Trump's national security advisor. He was going to come into office and immediately have access to all of the stuff that had been going on. And he would have sniffed it out very quickly and said, wow, they've been spying on the Trump campaign. And me. And he would have told the president, and that would have been it. So that's why one reason, probably the main reason, why they had to get rid of Flynn. And that's what Sidney Powell is saying and describing it as the first part of the insurance policy. Yep. She also says that the Covington law firm is resisting and in fact refusing to turn over court-ordered documents. Get this, including the communications between Eric Holder and Michael Churchoff discussing the Flynn case. So Sidney Powell believes that Covington law firm has communications which will show conversations between Eric Holder, Obama's wingman, and Michael Churchoff discussing the Flynn case. Now, you can't get any more deep state than Churchoff. I don't have time to go into it now, but I could go through the entire history of Churchoff, and specifically if you've been one of those people who really focused in a lot on the 9/11 hoax and you studied 9/11, then you understand exactly what a major key role that Churchoff played in the 9/11 hoax. And I did not know that he worked for Covington Law Firm. Yes, I mean, if you put in Churchoff, I mean, this guy's total deep state and totally connected to the intelligence community, totally connected to the FBI, the CIA, and the whole 9 yards. He's total deep state, Churchoff, and just, totally evil, right? So he's the worst of the worst. I mean, you want to talk about, you don't get much worse. I mean, you put him in that category with the Cheneys of the world. I mean, he's in that group. He's in that league. And you talk about a guy who profiteered off of 9/11. Oh, my God. This guy profited big time off of 9/11. I don't have time to go into it all. Google it and you'll find out what I'm talking about. Michael Churchoff. So apparently there are, according to Sidney Powell, likely communications from the Covington Law Firm between Eric the Wingman Holder and Michael Churchoff. Well, if Churchoff's involved, I can guarantee you that he's got, if Holder's having a conversation with Churchoff has got friends in the deep, deep state that would know everything that would have been going on from the intelligence side of things and from the FBI side of things. He's been in both law enforcement and intelligence. If he's having a conversation with Holder about the Flynn case, you can only imagine what's in them communications. Man, oh man, you want to talk about blowing this thing wide open. You get those communications. I guarantee you there's some juicy bits in there. Let's see if that pans out. I mean, Covington has been ordered by a judge to turn over all of these types of documents, including communications. And Sidney Powell says that they're not coming clean. So she must have... Someone has obviously tipped off Sidney Powell. Someone's obviously tipped her off and said, hey, there's probably communications between Churchoff and Holder. Someone's obviously tipped her off. That's not something I don't think would just cross her mind. So, yeah, let's just keep watching that. That is a very interesting turn of events. We have Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch, having just received 143 pages of documents he's had requested for a long time. These are conversations and documents showing the relationship between this James Baker, the James Baker who was Stefan Halper's boss over there at the Office of Net Assessment in the Pentagon. So now that he's got 143 pages of records of conversations and contacts between Isikoff and David Ignatius. That's a lot of communications. Ignatius and Baker. And Fitton, looking at all this, comes to the conclusion that it's very likely, or certainly, these 143 pages show that Baker was, in fact, an anonymous source for Ignatius. No question about that. No question he was an anonymous source. James Baker was an anonymous source for Isikoff. And Isikoff, of course, wrote the story about the Kislyak-Flynn phone call. So it's looking more and more like Baker was the person who gave Isikoff that information, which would be a crime. Well, we have a committee of Democrats which has filed a registration form with the Federal Election Commission to allow them to start a draft Michelle Obama as Biden's running mate campaign. Yeah, they're going to start a campaign now to draft Michelle Obama. Again, I mean, I've said this multiple times and I'll say it again. If Michelle Obama was interested in joining the political fray, and I don't think she would have any interest in that whatsoever, but if she were interested in that, then she just would have jumped in the primary and she would have won. She would have won hands down. She would have beat Biden and all the rest. Hands down, Michelle Obama. And I've seen her give speeches before. She's a knucklehead. She's not nearly what people make her out to be. You take a cue card away from her or a teleprompter, and she's a blooming idiot, just like her husband. Neither of them, without a teleprompter, can make a lick of sense. She has no executive experience. She's never served in elective office. Her positions are far to the left of the country. I think she would lose as bad as Biden, if not worse. But the plan here, is to get her as Biden's VP, and then once they get to the convention, to stick a knife in Biden's back and off him so that Michelle Obama can be the actual presidential nominee for the Democrats. And then she would likely name, a VP. And it's hard to say who that would be, but she would likely name a VP, maybe another woman. I don't know. I don't think this is going to work out at all. And again, I wish it would work out. I wish Michelle Obama was the Democrat nominee, because the Durham investigation, once it's complete, is going to show clearly that Obama himself was one of the top tiers in the coup plot, and also was a chief player, had to give the thumbs up to the targeting of Michael Flynn. He had to be involved in all those decisions. They wouldn't have taken place without him. So he is going to be so damaged by the time the November election comes out that his legacy will certainly be destroyed. Hell, Trump might have to pardon him, for all I know. But Obama is going to be destroyed by the Durham investigation. He may escape. I don't think they'll put a former president in prison or anything, even though he's a private citizen now, or charge him with a crime. But it's going to become known that he was a top-tier player and signed off on everything, or it would not have happened. So, yeah, go ahead and let Michelle Obama be the nominee. That would work out just fine with me. Of course, Trump having some fun yesterday as well, tweeting out that Comcast should open up a cold case against Psycho Joe Scarborough concerning that former staffer, that 28-year-old staffer who mysteriously died of a head injury when he was a congressman. She worked in his office. And, of course, that's an old story, but it's just funny that Trump is tweeting that out. He's just screwing with Joe Scarborough. He's having some fun. That's just Trump having some fun. But it accomplished his mission. It pissed off Scarborough and forced him to make a comment. And now Trump's got the dialogue going, so he can bring this back up. And then Joe will have to kind of go out and defend himself again. He was hoping that went away. And Mika is probably not going to be very happy that this is back. Well, let's check in with Paul Sperry. Paul Sperry is saying that Durham's investigators are now looking at the NSC, the National Security Council, and their role in setting up Michael Flynn. Which means they're looking at Sharamella, the Whistler, and also Comey's G-Man in the White House. And I believe that G-Man in the White House was someone who was working on Mike Pence's staff, if I remember correctly. Can't remember the name, but I remember that person had been identified as someone who's working on Mike Pence's staff, and Comey had put him into action, actually on the inside at the White House. And he was a communication electronics expert, probably planting bugs all over the White House. We'll continue to follow where that goes. Oh, yeah. Now, with the time I have left, I want to kind of piggyback off of something that Dan Bongino talked about on his show yesterday, and it's a very, very good place where he was going there, and he's done a lot of really, really good work here. And he ties a few things together, which he does very well. So I just want to kind of, if you didn't hear it on the Dan Bongino show, and I don't have the time he had to go into the depth, but I just want to kind of give you a general overview of where he's going with this segment that he did yesterday. So, as we all know, back in December of 2015, the British Embassy sent a letter. It went to both the outgoing and the incoming national security advisors. That would have been Susan Rice and Michael Flynn. And that letter of December 2016 was to inform Rice and Flynn that Christopher Steele was not totally honest or credible, and that any accusations that he might be making should not be taken as fact. So in December of 2016, shortly after Trump's elected, the British Embassy sends Rice and Flynn a letter essentially saying, don't trust Christopher Steele. He's not believable. He's not trustworthy. So now Flynn and Rice have this information. Keep that in mind. Remember, Susan Rice was in that meeting a couple of weeks later on January 5th, where they're talking about what to do about Flynn. Now, when you take this letter into consideration, you have to think that Susan Rice is sitting there in that meeting going, hey man, we got a problem, Jim and Boss and Silly Sally. I got this letter a couple weeks ago from the British Embassy telling me that Steele is not credible, is not totally honest, and we shouldn't take anything that he says as factual or true. Think about that. Think about what a bombshell that would be to Comey and Clapper and to Silly Sally, who are in the process of having a meeting, figuring out how they're going to, number one, put a noose around Flynn's neck so that he doesn't discover the crimes that they've been committing against Trump and his team and Flynn, and trying to figure out how they can continue having this investigation into Trump and his team without him knowing about it once he comes in and becomes, the president. And this is about, 15 days out from that point. So think about that. Susan Rice had that information, and you better believe she brought it up at that meeting. Now, whether or not she knew if Flynn got the same letter, she probably assumed that he did, because she's the outgoing advisor and he's the incoming. Now, whether or not that she was advised of that, she probably assumed that, especially because of what happens next. So that's January 5th. Then January 6th, Comey goes to the Trump Tower and gives Trump this so-called briefing on the salacious parts of the dossier. But of course he was there for another reason, and we all have been through that before. Then, on January 7th, there is another briefing by Comey. And this is with Trump and his national security team. Well, who do you think was there on behalf of Trump's national security team? It wasn't even inauguration day yet. This is still 2 weeks before inauguration and 2 days after the infamous January 5th meeting, and just weeks after both Flynn and Rice received the letter from the British Embassy. So Comey's in this meeting with Trump and his national security team, which certainly would have included Flynn. And he's telling them in this briefing, Comey is telling Trump and his national security team, which likely included Flynn, yeah, we're getting intelligence that shows that the Russians are meddling in the election, and they've got some Hillary. We're hearing that they've got files on Hillary, and that they've got files on you, Mr. President, that they've got, documents, they got files, they got something. The Russians got something on both Clinton and you, and they're going through this. Now, can you imagine, here you have got Flynn sitting here in this meeting, being told all this stuff. And keep in mind, Flynn is a true intelligence professional, whereas Comey is an idiot. And Flynn, most likely, probably says to Comey, so where exactly are you getting your information? Have you talked to the sub-sources on this? Because what does Flynn know? Flynn has already been sent a letter by the British Embassy telling him that Christopher Steele is bullshit. And here's Comey briefing Trump, giving him this information, and Flynn's like, and Comey likely does not know about the letter that Flynn received. And Flynn probably calls him out and says, what's the sources for that? Have you checked these sources? Which probably rattles Comey. I was like, whoa, Flynn just pushed back. He must know something. Yeah. That's another reason why when Strzok says the 7th floor is involved, that's why the 7th floor is involved. Because Comey clearly realized in that meeting that Flynn knew something and was on to it. And he was going to be trouble. And Comey was up to his eyeballs in a lot of crimes. They had no choice but to take out Flynn. They had no choice. See what a precarious situation they put themselves into? Now there's another thing going on out there today where people are going back and re-looking at some things. We've been talking in the past week or so about this lie, or what we believe is a lie, where Halper gives this tip that Svetlana Lakova, this Russian-born British citizen who's a researcher in the UK, who Halper created a setup for her and Flynn, and then provided that tip, or we believe he was the one who provided the tip. That's being drawn into question now. Because in that tip, Halper says that he witnessed Lakova getting into this taxi cab with Flynn, or a car with Flynn. We assume a taxi cab. In fact, I think it's been reported some places it was a taxi. Now, up to this point, we've all believed, well, Halper's lying. Lakova says Halper was not there at that dinner. He was not there. So he could not have seen her get into a car for two reasons. Number one, he wasn't there, and number two, she never got into Flynn's car. And that's been pretty much verified. Multiple witnesses. So at this point, we all just assume that Halper is lying when he says that first person witnessed saw Lakova get into this car. Now, what may be going on here, what some people are suspecting, is that there was someone else there named Richard Dearlove, who mysteriously resigns from his position in British intelligence shortly after Trump's election. So it's now being some speculation out there that it may not have been Halper who actually provided the tip. Now, he set it up. He's the one who, not personally, but he has people there that work at Cambridge, and he obviously gave the instructions to invite Lakova and Flynn and have them seated next to one another. But now it's being suggested maybe it wasn't Halper who provided that tip, but rather could have been Richard Dearlove on Halper's behalf. We don't know, but again, that's just another question, part of the larger mystery. There are a lot of questions, a lot of holes to be filled. And we'll just keep following the story until it all gets sorted out. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow with more TowerGate. See you guys. Bye.